I'm sure I'm not the only parent who at one time or another has felt like toys are literally taking over our house. And so it got me thinking, what would happen if I just got rid of all my kids' toys? Hello, if you're new to my channel, my name is Kallie Branciforte and I am the mom of 3 aged newborn to 4, and we live in not a super huge house. Our house is 1,100 square feet and we have just a very sort of small like playroom area for our children. It's essentially like part of a sunroom that is off of our kitchen. And I am generally pretty good about rotating out my kids' toys in this area since it's not a large space, but it's still crazy to me how quickly this space will become super cluttered, super fast. And it makes me just feel really frustrated most of the time because half of these toys are not even really getting played with. But then whenever I would go to organize the space, I kept keeping items there because there was always this idea of like, oh, what if they might play with this? Anyways, I saw a reel on Instagram like a month ago and I didn't even save it. I don't even know where it went. But basically the woman was like, I got rid of all of my kids' toys and this is what happened. And she didn't actually get rid of all of her kids' toys. She kept some of the tried and true favorites. She also kept out books and art supplies, but essentially she got rid of the majority of toys in her home. And she was like, my kids didn't even notice. And it really got me thinking. I was like, I could probably get rid of a lot of my kids' toys as well, and my kids probably wouldn't notice either. So I decided to do a huge purge of my kids' toy area and essentially aim to get rid of 75% of the toys that we had in this space and sort of see what happened. So the first thing I did was just a purge. I went through bins and baskets and I got rid of stuff. I didn't necessarily totally get rid of everything. Some stuff did get donated and some stuff I packed away in the basement to decide on another time if I was going to need to keep it or not. I think certainly with kid toys, one of the biggest hangups as parents is the idea that they just might play with it. Definitely when we're doing any organizing or any decluttering, that just in case stuff is always the hardest to get rid of. But I feel like especially with kids toys, as parents, we're always looking for things that will keep our kids entertained for like a good chunk of time. And I feel like that's why it can be extra hard to get rid of kids' toys. Not to mention as your kids get older, they will remember certain toys and they will ask for them. And so there's always that risk of getting rid of something and then them suddenly like remembering it existed and asking for it. They literally will not play with something for 2 years and then all of a sudden be like, Mom, where's that red truck that my Uncle Colin got me 2 Christmases ago? I've decided today that it is my most favorite toy. So me, when it comes to decluttering, typically when I declutter lots of areas in my home, I'm much more ruthless about just getting it the heck out of my house. With kid toys, I may be more inclined to pack some of it away to sort of decide on for later. Lots of times I will put it in a basket or I'll put it in a box, and then in 6 months or a year, I can sort of decide, has this been asked for? Has this been taken out? And then it makes it easier for me to get rid of it. But I did try to be really ruthless about what I was actually keeping out. Like I found myself lots of times coming up onto toys and being like, oh, they might want to play with this, or sometimes they do like this, sometimes my kids will take this out and they will play with it. But I just tried to stay really strong. I reminded myself, for the stuff I'm packing away, I can always get it out again if I need it, right? The point is just taking it out of my living space where it's sort of cluttering up my day-to-day life. We had an entire bin in this space that was dedicated just to cars. It was like all of our toys with wheels. My kids never once in my working memory have gone in and independently taken cars out of that bin to play with for any period of time, like maybe 60 seconds and that's tops. But I kept keeping toys in that bin because I was like, kids like cars. What if they want to take out the cars? What if they want to play with them? But when I went to actually declutter, I was like, never once that I remember have they actively on their own independently taken those cars out to play with them. And I also packed away some bigger toys too. For example, we got this ATM and cash register for, my son got it for Christmas because he had been asking for it literally for a year for like this toy ATM. And so he got it for Christmas. It has been out since Christmas. They do play with it on occasion. They will take it out and use it, but it's not super frequently. And I was like, does this really need to be out taking up a whole like cubby of space to get used maybe once a month, when instead I could just take it out once a month, let them play with it for a day, and then pack it away in the basement, which is where we keep our leftover toys. To help myself really declutter as I sort of came across toys, I would really ask myself, has one of my children independently chosen to play with this in the last 7 days? Because I feel like the independent part is definitely really big. And then I told myself, if they hadn't independently chosen to play with it in the last 7 or even 14 days, it's probably something that does not need to be out in our main living space 24/7. Basically all of the puzzles went, board games went, about half of their dress up stuff went. I got rid of their toy tools, their toy barn. It all got packed away. What I ended up keeping was a few select things like the play kitchen, my kids' magnet tiles, because we do use these multiple times a week and my kids play with them independently, as well as our train set. I kept a very small amount of dress up items, as well as our 4 play silks. I kept books, as well as these chapbooks that we get once a month. My kids are obsessed with looking back at their pictures. We use these books all of the time. And then I ended up with 2 empty shelves, as well as an entire empty basket in our storage bench. And after I purged and decluttered everything, it felt so good. The space felt really like light and manageable and no longer felt overwhelming. And so I decided to sort of see like how my kids reacted to the space when they saw it, as well as how they interacted with it over the next few days. So when my kids got home from school that day, they didn't even notice that I had done anything to the play space. I got rid of literally 3/4 of the stuff that was in here and nobody even batted an eye. There was not a peep, and then over literally the next entire week, nobody requested a toy that was gone. Nobody questioned where a toy had gone. Nobody asked for any of the toys that I had gotten rid of, which actually really surprised me because I thought at least there would be a request for one of the things that I had gotten rid of. But so far, now it's been almost 2 weeks now that I'm sitting down to film this, not one request. But the real win on this was now the toys in our house have suddenly become 100 times easier to clean. The play space is easier to clean, it's easier to manage, it doesn't feel overwhelming, and the toys don't completely overflow into our living space over and over and over again multiple times a day. My kids still found plenty of things to do independently to play with. They even got really creative with their play, doing more involved and more creative play around the house, but at the end of the day, I didn't have a playroom that had toys poured all over the floor everywhere. There weren't 8 different toys scattered around different places on my first floor that were all played with for like 5 minutes or less. Basically, the playroom was not overflowing into my house as much as it had been. And a really great example of this was that like first Sunday morning, I think it was like a Sunday, it was like a rainy day, we were just spending the day at home and my kids wanted to make a fort on the dining room table. So we just like took some blankets, we put them over the dining room table and they made a little fort in there. And my kids played with this, the 2 of them, for over an hour, just like very happily playing. But what they were doing is they were like going around the house and like finding little like treasures, right? And bringing them into their fort. They basically created like a little hoarders situation under there of things they had found, books and pillows and toys. But because their playroom wasn't absolutely weighed down with 800 extra items and pieces, the stuff in their fort was super manageable, right? And it was stuff that they were literally able to put away on their own really easily. So what did I learn ultimately from getting rid of all of my kids' toys, which wasn't really actually getting rid of my kids' toys? It was getting rid of like 75% of their toys. Firstly, I realized that kids really don't need that much stuff, which deep down I knew this. I knew that kids don't need that much to be entertained, right? Like kids' favorite toys are always like an empty cardboard box. But it's really easy as a parent to get caught up in all of the toys. We want things that will lead to independent play so that maybe we can get 20 minutes of free time to like drink our coffee in peace in the morning or to put dinner on the table. And then once you have the excess, it can be hard to get rid of it. But I think this whole process really reminded me, kids really do not need that much to be entertained. And more importantly, typically the less that there is, the more creative our kids will get with the play. Having less didn't mean my kids played any less. They still found plenty of things to play with because kids are creative and they will literally play with anything. And next, I learned how much more manageable my kids' stuff was when there was less of it, which obviously is a lesson that I already know. On my whole channel, I share all about like organizing and decluttering. And I always talk about how less stuff is really the key to keeping a space tidy, because the less stuff you have to manage, the less time it is, the less overwhelming it is. I knew this deep down, right? That less meant it would be easier to manage. But again, with kids stuff, it's really easy to fall into the trap of having more. Sometimes there's just lessons that you have to learn over and over and over again. So this was a fun little experiment, and probably one that I will have to continue to do over and over and over again, because the thing with kids' toys, or really just stuff in our house in general, is there's always going to be new stuff coming in, and so you kind of have to constantly stay on top of our stuff. So anyways, this was a fun little experiment to do. I highly suggest that you consider trying it out for yourself if you also feel like toys are taking over your space. As always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember to be kind to yourself and others, and I will see you all in my next video.